Night story. I'm from a coastal town on the Gulf of Morisquillo, but I always studied elsewhere. Even after I finished university, I won a scholarship with a foundation to do a master's degree in Medellin. At home it's just my mom and me. She had a falling out with her family when she got pregnant with me because they wanted to marry her off to a guy who was pursuing her and had money, but she liked someone else. So she ran away with him and got pregnant. A few months later, her sister's rage was so great that my mom says they put a curse on her so that the boyfriend, my dad, would grow to hate her. She says they lived peacefully until one day he supposedly got up out of nowhere in the middle of the night, screaming and saying all kinds of insults, grabbed his things and left. We found out about him months later when they found him hanged from a ceiba tree with a gunshot wound to the head. No one knows what really happened to him. My mom managed as best she could to get ahead. They had bought a small piece of land at a good price and Mom sold a part of it, opened a roadside restaurant, and for as long as I can remember, that's what we've always lived on. She always wanted to keep me away from my aunts, who sometimes passed by after they found out she had a business and was doing well. They would come in the afternoon, stand in the business across the street, laugh at her, shout vulgarities at her, and at night they would throw trash in front of her place. My mom never spoke to them, she simply ignored them. When I left for Medellin they found out and that's when the trouble started. One of them went there to try to turn people against me at the university. One random day, I arrived and several classmates told me that a lady at the entrance had told them a bunch of nasty things about me with a photo in her hand, claiming I was a husband stealer, a vagrant drug addict who had stolen money from my grandmother and used it to go to Medellin to prostitute myself. But not content with that, I don't know how she found out which room I was staying in, and when I returned I found a strange package at the door. It was a normal, ordinary box, but inside there was a doll with a razor blade stuck in its face. I took it as a threat, so what I did was notify the police, who offered to have a patrol car in the area to keep an eye out. But the doll turned out to be something else. I hadn't wanted to tell my mom anything so as not to worry her. What I did was burn it and carry on as if nothing had happened. But one day I couldn't take it anymore and I talked to her. It turned out that for several nights I had been lying down about to fall asleep when I felt knocking at the door. I would go see who it was and there was no one there. But when I lay down again just as I was drifting off to sleep, I felt as if someone sat on my feet, so much so that my legs would shake. I thought it was a nightmare, but I would jolt awake and feel the warmth on the sheet and on my legs, as if someone had been leaning on me. Plus, I felt like there was something moving around outside, going back and forth. I was too scared to even look at the door. I would cover myself from head to toe with the feeling that something was watching me from the foot of the bed. On the third day they knocked on the door but I didn't get up to see. I played dumb and stayed in bed but they kept knocking. It almost felt like they were kicking the door. I got so distressed by the situation that I called the police again. The motorcycle cops arrived almost immediately but didn't see anyone. They stayed outside for a good while. I locked everything up, turned off the lights and went to bed again. Not even 5 minutes passed when I suddenly felt the door slam against the wall as if someone had pushed it hard. I jumped up running with a stick in my hand, turned on the lights, ran to the living room and I see the door closed, but I noticed a mark on the wall as if the doorknob had hit it. I'm going to call the police again, I told myself. Let them call me crazy, I don't care, but something is happening here. When I turned back to the room to look for the phone, that's when I saw her. A woman sitting at the foot of the bed, dressed in black, looking at the wall and laughing. But it was a strange laugh, like from someone with a sick throat. My mom had told me that one of my aunts, the oldest, had a cancer that had affected her throat. So you can imagine my shock. I immediately ran out for the keys to leave and go to a friend's house when suddenly the power went out. I was left in the dark in the middle of the living room, alone, trembling with fear, unable to see anything because there weren't even street lamps in that area. That's when the worst part began. I started to hear first what sounded like someone cracking their knuckles, then the same laugh as before coming from the room. I didn't know what to do. I just turned my head and moved the stick from side to side while saying over and over, I am with God, nothing will harm me. Then, at one point, I moved the stick backward because I felt someone approaching. I felt the tip touch something soft. I stretched the stick to touch it again and suddenly it got yanked with tremendous force. I almost fell. I ran toward the little light coming from the street window and started screaming for help, but it was like being in a nightmare where my screams had no strength. Thankfully, a short while later, the power came back on. I stayed in that corner, crying from fear until daybreak. That morning, I spoke with my mom on the phone. She told me that they had put a mark on me, that I had to get out of there and get blessed in a church because this was meant to torment me. I listened to her. I moved out the following week. I remember that while I was looking for an apartment, I stayed with a friend again. That week, things kept happening. My hair was falling out in clumps, my things would go missing. When I was alone I felt like someone was calling me. I'd wake up with bruises on my legs. I was on the verge of a breakdown. The worst was the day I was moving the few things I had, mostly books, clothes, and a desk. I went with my friend to the old room to get everything. She was helping me pack when suddenly she says, "Hey, this little box is pretty, what is it?" It was a little box where I kept photos of me and my mom, which had been missing since the night I saw the apparition. That was like my most valuable treasure from afar. When I felt bad, I would fall asleep looking at those photos and reading the notes my mom had written on the back. I told her, all happy, I thought I had thrown it away. "There's a photo of when I was a kid in there, you're going to die laughing. Open it," is what I told her. But suddenly, this woman lets out a scream as if she had seen something horrible. I go to see what it was, and in the box weren't my photos. There was a ball of hair matted with blood. The hair was the same color as mine. I am completely sure it was mine. I found the photos later, shredded to pieces in a little bag under the sink, where there was also a doll identical to the one I had burned. That same weekend I couldn't take it anymore and went to my mom's. She already knew what was happening. She told me she had already confronted her sisters, but they denied everything. In the end it was a priest who helped us. To make a long story short, they found another doll in my mom's house. Those weren't just marks. They were possessions meant to allow a spirit to move from one place to another. I hadn't noticed, but Mom was practically bald and I was heading the same way. They were intense days of prayer and struggle. One night, something happened. Something revolted inside of me. I remember clearly there was a torrential downpour that time. I was praying with my mom in the room when I felt something hit me hard on the head, and then my stomach started to vibrate. It was a strange sensation. Shortly after, I felt nauseous and vomited a bunch of black liquid. Then the fever and delirium started. My mom says she put warm water on my forehead while I was supposedly arguing with someone, even insulting the person. At one point I said a name, the name of one of my aunts, the one she was most afraid of, the one who was sick in the throat. My mom immediately made the sign of the cross, grabbed my hand tightly and began to rebuke it. I can't explain what really happened, but I felt like I could see everything but I wasn't there. Suddenly, in my head, everything went white, and after that, I don't remember anything else. They say that supposedly my aunt traveled in astral projection and, couldn't return and tried to take possession of one of us. They found her dead that morning after all that happened to us.